I'm trying to push the why because ultimately I want her to believe the stuff because she is convinced that it's true, objectively true, and not just because mom and dad said so. Because that kind of faith, if that's your reasoning, if that's your justification, that's not going to survive. So I think one way to think about this is that you've got these different levels of development, intellectual development and moral development in children. And just as a very simple breakdown, I think you can look at those earlier ages, kind of the elementary school, 0 to, let's say, 10, kind of 4th, 5th grade, as really the emphasis in terms of their discipleship and owning their faith is teaching them what to believe, right? So that's where you want to teach them the what. Now, when they get into junior high, this is where their minds begin to develop. They begin to be able to think abstractly. They start questioning. This is what we saw with kids, our kids, is that they start pushing back, and sometimes we would take that as a threat to our authority, which sometimes it is, but often it's because their minds are developing and growing, and they're no longer just interested in the what, but they want to know the why now. And I remember doing this with my parents. My dad would, he'd say certain things that he kind of always said, and I'd be like, "Well, is that really true? Like, why do you think that, Dad?" And so there's this kind of pushing, but it's a healthy sense of asking questions, wanting to know the reasons for things. So this is the where you teach them the why, and then I think the third stage is really kind of in the high school years. You're teaching them the how-to. This is where you take the what and the why, kind of put it together, and then see how it works in real life. And this is where giving high school students real life experiences with their faith, however that looks, is really important. And so at those earlier stages, you're laying that foundation. And frankly, when you look at Christian adults today, most of them don't even know the what, right? Or the what is just, it's like this shallow. Right. So it turns out that the what of Christianity is love Jesus and be good. And that's about it. And it's just repackaged in different ways, right? But what we want to do is give them good theology. I mean, that's really the what at those earliest of ages. It's theology. It's the study of God. It's the study of Scripture. And so that's what you're kind of laying in that foundation, those foundational years. So with your 2, your 3-year-old, you're doing things like very practically, like a catechism. For a lot of, I think, contemporary Christians or evangelical Christians, the idea of catechism sounds like a Catholic thing or something. We just don't have a whole lot of experience with that in our tradition. Catechism is simply taking our theology and putting it in question and answer form. And it's great for young children because young children have these minds that are like these steel traps, and they can memorize so much. And they don't understand it all, but that's okay because you're going to keep building on it. But you're laying this foundation of theology. And then as they really come to know the what, things like God's attributes, right? When I go and speak to high schoolers nowadays, I'll do a test. I'll say, okay, list for me all of God's attributes, right? That kind of tell us who he is. And typically high school students will get 6 or 7 down on a piece of paper. And frankly, it's not much better with Christian adults either. And then I'll say, well, here's a list from just a standard systematic theology book, and it's 25. And all you could think of were these 6, and typically they're repeats. It's like, well, God is loving, God is caring, God, and it's just, and they miss the vast majority of his attributes, and so how can we not see that young people and adults, any of us who don't know much about God, are going to have a very deep relationship with God? It's like if you asked me about Erin, like, hey, tell me about your wife, and I said, oh yeah, Erin, she's got blonde hair, brownish hair, she's 5'6", she's got 2 eyes. Yeah, that's Erin. You'd laugh, and then you'd say, no, tell me about Erin. And if I said, no, that's all I got, you would conclude something about the nature of our relationship. It's not very deep. There's not much richness there, or there's not a whole lot of a relationship. And in the same way, I think that's how it is our lack of knowledge about God reveals how shallow our faith is. And so on those early stages, you're just trying to pour that knowledge in and let them memorize those things and let them memorize scripture and attributes of God and all these in catechism. And then you're going to build on that. And then the junior high years is when they're asking the why. So you capitalize on that. In fact, with our kids, I like to prompt the why. I don't want to necessarily sit back and wait. So when they're 10, 11, 12, I want to be the one who's pushing them to ask the why questions. So I remember our daughter Ella, who's number 4, we were driving in the car, and I think she was like 10. And so I just said, "Hey, Ella, wait, why do you think that God exists? Why do you think there's even a God?" And she looked at me like, "What are you talking about, Dad?" And,
"Oh, Dad."
Yeah. "Oh, Dad." "Oh, Dad." And I said, her answer was, "Well, because you've told me, you've taught me that." I'm like, "Okay, can Dad be wrong?"
"Good job."
Yeah. I'm like, gosh. And she's like, I'm like, "Can Dad be wrong?" And she said, "Well, no." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well."
Correct.
Nailed.
Correct again. Man, I'm nailing this discipleship thing.
I should start a company called Maven.
She's like, "Well, of course you could be wrong." I said, "All right, let's just say maybe, I don't know what I'm talking." No, that wasn't plausible at all. I said, "Well, maybe Dad doesn't know what he's talking about, or do you have reasons for yourself? Besides Dad told you so." And she's like, "Well, I don't know." And so I'm trying to push the why, because ultimately I want her to believe the stuff because she is convinced that it's true, objectively true, and not just because Mom and Dad said so. Because that kind of faith, if that's your reasoning, if that's your justification, that's not going to survive in a culture that's very, it's coming after your faith.